the winners, the losers. My message to the losers, losers, look in the mirror. No? Well, maybe you should, sorry. Well, that's my feeling. Losers, look in the mirror, okay? You know, I mean, for months, Democrats have been saying, how is this even close? And they're right, it wasn't. They could not conceive of a second Trump term, but they should have. When does America ever turn down second? I mean, come on.
It all started on a day when everyone thought it would be business as usual on The View. The hosts, as always, were confident, laughing, tossing out the same takes they do every week. But then, boom, something different happened. A guest walked in who wasn't there to play nice. He wasn't there to nod and agree or pretend their opinions were the only ones that mattered. He came to challenge everything.
Well, they won. Now they have reality they have to deal with. You know, we'll see what they do. See if they live up to their word. Trump says he's going to deport 12 million people. How are you going to get 12 million people back into Mexico? And today, Trump said, I'm way ahead of you. Why do you think I left so many holes in the wall?
The moment he opened his mouth, the mood shifted. You could feel the tension. He went straight for the heart of the show's image, its reputation for having diverse perspectives. He called it out for what it really was, a place where only one side gets to speak freely. No sugarcoating. No soft landing. He accused the panel of pushing a narrow, one-sided narrative and made it clear if you don't follow their line of thinking, you're instantly labeled the enemy.
Kamala was on Saturday Night Live, as the losing candidate often is. It worked so well for Hillary. Let's run that back. And it just made me think, I'm sure every single member of the Saturday Night Live cast was a Harris supporter. But what if one of them wasn't? What if one of those cast members was for Trump? Would they have felt comfortable saying so? I really don't think so. They would have had to keep it to themselves. That's not a good place for us to be. I remember when, and that happens even more on the left. And I remember when Elon Musk hosted, and this is well before he was a Trumper. This is 3 or 4 years. He was just the richest man in the world. And a number of the cast members on Saturday Night Live, like, they didn't want to deal with him. They didn't exactly boycott, but they made it plain. And I was thinking, really? You have Elon Musk on your show for a week. You could talk to one of the most interesting, brilliant people the world has ever produced, even about this issue that bothers you so much, that he's so rich and lots of people aren't. But no, you don't want to even deal with him. That's what I hate about the left. You're brats. You're brats and you're snobs and people don't like.
But it wasn't just vague critique. He aimed directly at the show's refusal to tolerate different political views, especially anything that leans conservative.
Israel 5 times. They've started 5 wars since they were given that land back. They could have chosen to turn that place into any place they wanted to, and they took a lot of money that they took from the international community and they spent it on bombs and guns and building tunnels. So if they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? It's a war. I don't know how to do that, and you don't know how to do that. I assume the Israeli do. Of course, everybody is, but that's what happens in a war. Here's a way to stop that. Stop attacking Israel.
According to him, The View isn't about sharing ideas, it's about reinforcing the same ones over and over. And that hit hard. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now let's continue.
Ira Glasser, former longtime head of the ACLU, talking about free speech. Whoopi Goldberg, who, by the way, I hope is still a friend, we can disagree with each other, should not be canceled or put off her show, as much as I totally disagree with her crazy statement. Free speech. She should be there. She shouldn't get a timeout.
Not every single thing has to be for everybody.
Right.
We can have platforms that have stuff on them that not everyone on that platform or who consumes stuff on that platform enjoys. And The View is a particularly weird place to do a cancellation.
It's called The View?
It's called The View. It's not called The Facts.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that it's called, I mean, I don't think they meant this when Barbara Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's The View.
Well,
that's the problem in America.
There
is one view,
right, and
one
that's clearly
true opinion, and everybody else can go sit in the corner.
Because the next part? Things only get more uncomfortable for The View. So, after calling out The View's fake diversity of thought, he didn't back down. In fact, he pushed even harder. He looked right into the camera, then out at the audience, and said something that left the whole room in silence. Losers need to look in the mirror. That wasn't just some vague insult. It was a direct shot at the liberal media figures who couldn't accept the results of elections they didn't like.
Have a very different opinion. And the answer is not to make them sit in a corner for 2 weeks. That is insulting. It's so insulting to make a 65-year-old, I mean, the person at ABC News said, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. Reflect. How insulting for someone of her age, who's a sophisticated person, and the impact of her comment. There is no impact. There aren't neo-Nazis waiting for the green light from the lady on The View to go out and do a new crystal knot.
Yeah, so right. And the whole point of free speech is we don't need free speech when we're right, when everyone agrees with us. We need free speech when we're wrong. We need free speech to make mistakes. We need free speech to say really unpopular things. And one of the reasons I'm always proud to come on this show, and I suspect you feel the same way, Catherine, is this is the only space left on television where people can speak freely and not be terrified, right? And you have...
He brought up the confusion and outrage people expressed when Trump surged in popularity again. The View's hosts, like so many others, couldn't understand how it was even possible. But instead of doing some self-reflection, instead of asking what they might have missed, they just kept pointing fingers. That's what he was calling out. Then came the real jab. He compared their denial to a failure to recognize reality. According to him, they never expected Trump to have a second chance because they were stuck in their own echo chamber.
The whole point is they didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
and whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not, let me just ask, what stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect.
Yes, you can. There's a lot
hold on. Calm down.
He said America rarely turns down a sequel, whether it's movies or presidents. And the moment he said it, you could practically see the hosts' faces freeze. They weren't ready for someone who wasn't scared to say what half the country was thinking. And they definitely weren't ready to hear that the winners they think they are might actually be the ones refusing to face the truth. Then it got even more tense. The View's panel, trying to regain control, brought up one of their favorite talking points, immigration. They asked how Trump could ever deliver on his promise to deport millions of undocumented immigrants. It was the kind of question they thought would trap him, make him stumble or soften up, but instead, he fired back with razor-sharp sarcasm. He said, "Trump's already ahead of you. Why do you think he left so many holes in the wall?" That line landed like a slap. The audience erupted, but the hosts? They didn't know whether to laugh, argue, or pretend it didn't happen. But he wasn't done. He shifted focus to the liberal media as a whole, late-night hosts, celebrities, political commentators. He ripped into them for pretending to be brave, claiming they'd leave the country if Trump won, only to stay put and act like nothing happened. He called it performative, fake, just more scripted outrage. And that's what cut deepest. He wasn't just talking politics anymore. He was exposing their pattern: loud declarations, moral superiority, and zero accountability. He wasn't playing their game, and it was clear they had no idea how to respond when someone wasn't afraid to hit back harder. The View tried to corner him. Instead, he flipped the script. But the heat didn't stop with The View. He turned his sights on Saturday Night Live, tearing into the culture behind the scenes, one that pretends to be edgy and free-thinking, but in reality, forces everyone to conform. He brought up something most people never dare to say out loud. What if someone on the SNL cast actually supported Trump? Would they feel safe saying it? His answer was crystal clear, no chance. He said they'd have to keep quiet, bury their opinion, or risk being iced out by their own team. Not for something criminal, not for hate speech, for simply voting differently. That moment hit differently because it wasn't about Trump himself anymore. It was about fear. Fear of speaking out. Fear of being labeled and exiled by your own side. And it painted a brutal picture, a place that claims to support expression, but only if you're saying the right things. He even mentioned the reaction to Elon Musk hosting SNL years ago, not because Elon was a conservative, but just because he was rich. Cast members openly protested, refused to engage, and some barely showed up. He called it out for what it was: childish and smug. A missed opportunity to have a real conversation with someone influential, just because of personal bias. And then he dropped the hammer. You're brats. You're snobs. And people are sick of it. The silence after that, it said everything. Then came the moment that truly rattled The View. They had opened the door, bringing up Middle East conflicts, maybe expecting a safe, controlled conversation. But what they got was a complete detour, one that left the co-host silent and visibly uncomfortable. He didn't tiptoe around the topic. He brought up Israel directly, saying they had the right to defend themselves, and pointing out how much international aid had been misused, not on building a future, but on bombs, guns, and underground tunnels. The View wasn't prepared for that kind of bluntness. No carefully phrased lines, no vague sympathy, just facts delivered without a filter. One host tried to challenge him, but he shut it down fast. If they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? You don't know. I don't know. That's war. But here's how you stop it. Stop attacking. The crowd clapped, but the table? Dead quiet. And that silence wasn't just awkward, it was revealing. For a show that loves to argue, none of them had anything to say. They had no counterpoint, no smart comeback. Because he wasn't just dropping opinions, he was exposing how shallow their arguments really were. He wasn't asking anyone to pick a side. He was demanding honesty. And when honesty entered the room went cold. At this point, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But he still wasn't done. He turned to one of the most controversial moments on The View when one of their own got suspended over a statement the network didn't like. He didn't dodge it. He said her comment was crazy, sure, but then added something that shocked everyone. She shouldn't be canceled. She shouldn't be taken off the air. That's when the room shifted again. Because now, he was defending someone he completely disagreed with. Not because he liked what she said, but because he believed in free speech. And that kind of move? That's rare. Especially on a show that's become a symbol of cancel culture itself. He pointed out how ridiculous it was to tell a grown woman in her 60s to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. His voice dripped with sarcasm as he mocked the network's decision, saying, "What impact? There aren't neo-Nazis waiting for the green light from the lady on The View." He wasn't defending the comment, he was defending the right to speak without being punished like a school kid. And in doing so, he made The View look like exactly what they claim they're not, a place where one wrong sentence means you're out. The message was simple: free speech isn't just for opinions we like, it's for the ones we don't. From there, he zoomed out and hit on something even bigger: the illusion of freedom in today's media. He said, "We don't need free speech when we're right, we need it when we're wrong." And you could feel that line settle into the room like a gut punch. He explained that real freedom means being allowed to make mistakes, say unpopular things, and still be allowed to speak. He praised the show he was currently on, Not The View, for being one of the only places left on television where people could speak their minds without fear. A place where you could be wrong, challenge ideas, and not get thrown into the fire just for having a different take. And then came the ultimate comparison. Have you ever seen anything like that happen on The View? The answer didn't need to be spoken. Everyone watching already knew. That kind of real discussion, that level of open disagreement, it just doesn't happen there. Because on The View, disagreement isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Step out of line and you're gone. Say something unpopular and you're shamed into silence. And that's exactly what he was shining a light on, a show that calls itself The View, while silencing anyone who brings a different one. It wasn't just criticism, it was exposure. Cold, unfiltered exposure of how things really work behind the polished set. Then he dug even deeper right into the heart of what The View tries to hide behind cheerful banter and fake unity. He brought up the 2020 election and the media's obsession with blaming racism and misogyny for Trump's support. It was a narrative repeated over and over again, especially by The View's panel, as if no other explanation could possibly exist. But he broke that wall with one simple truth. People just wanted a better life. He said voters weren't necessarily drawn to Trump because they hated women or minorities. Many of them were struggling financially, emotionally, socially. They didn't care about sound bites. They wanted stability, safety, and the ability to provide for their families. And when Trump spoke to those needs, even if his delivery was messy, people listened. That hit hard, especially when he pointed out that even the poorest demographics those the media assumes will always vote left showed more support for Trump than expected. Not all of them, but enough to make a difference. He even called out the snobbery in assuming that anyone without a college degree who votes conservative must be ignorant or hateful. He said, stats are stats, but a stat doesn't say, I voted for Trump because I'm racist. That kind of arrogance, he warned, is exactly why so many feel unheard and disrespected. And just like that, the carefully crafted story The View tries to tell about why people vote the way they do came crashing down. But before the moment fully passed, he delivered one more blow, one that didn't just shake the hosts, but also exposed something bigger about how power works in modern media. He asked a simple but dangerous question: what happens to people who just want to ask questions? What if someone doesn't agree with the official story, not because they're hateful, not because they're extreme, but because they see something different from their own experience? That's where the silence on The View became deafening. He described how this attitude, the refusal to even hear opposing thoughts, has seeped into every layer of left-leaning media. He called out the one true opinion mentality, where everything outside the approved script gets shoved into the corner. And then he brought it right back to The View's name. It's called The View, not the facts, he said with a smirk. You could hear the air leave the room. And he wasn't wrong. He reminded everyone that when Barbara Walters created The View, the goal was to bring together different women from different walks of life to talk openly. That was the pitch. But now? It's one perspective, repeated endlessly. Step outside the lines, and you're treated like a virus. He used real examples. Hosts being sidelined, guests getting shouted down, segments suddenly cut short when things get uncomfortable. And above all else, the pressure constant, suffocating pressure to agree, to perform agreement, even when it feels fake. Then, he asks something no one had the nerve to bring up. What does that do to the audience? Think about it. Millions of viewers watch The View expecting honest conversations, maybe even a clash of ideas. But instead, they get the same conclusions, wrapped in different faces. And if someone dares to challenge it, they're met with laughter, eye rolls, or worse, complete silence. Like what happened when he spoke about Israel, free speech, and voters without degrees. Nobody even tried to argue, they just shut down. And that's silence? That's not strength. That's fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of what might happen if people start thinking for themselves. He said it plainly. Having a different opinion shouldn't make you an enemy, but that's what we've turned it into. And whether you agreed with him or not, you couldn't deny it, he had ripped the curtain wide open. The View wasn't just exposed that day, it was undressed. The smiles, the slogans, the applause, they couldn't hide the truth anymore. And the truth was sitting right there at the table, refusing to be quiet. And then came the part that really exposed the cracks in The View's carefully managed image. Right when someone on the panel tried to push back, tried to redirect the conversation, chaos broke out. Tensions flared, voices rose, and everything fell into that familiar pattern: shut down the disagreement, smooth it over, and pretend the disruption didn't happen. But this time, the disruption was the point. He called it out for exactly what it was: proof that even a small dose of an opposing viewpoint sends the show into panic mode. Just one idea that doesn't fit their narrative, and suddenly the mood shifts. The room gets uncomfortable, the energy drops. You can practically see the producers behind the scenes scrambling to steer things back to safe territory. But it was too late. He'd already made the point on shows like The View: dissent isn't debated, it's erased. If someone tries to say, maybe people aren't just voting based on hate, the room doesn't listen, they tense up. The conversation doesn't deepen, it dies. And that's the scary part. Not that people disagree, but that disagreement itself has become a threat, not a conversation, not a challenge, a threat. And he made it clear, until that changes, the people these shows claim to speak for, they'll keep tuning out. Because when the only view allowed is The View, the truth doesn't just get ignored, it gets buried. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.